They had been coming for a long time, but most people didn't pay attention. Far away from Earth, beyond the borders of known space, something was moving. It wasn't a single ship or a small fleet. It was something bigger, something that swallowed entire worlds like they were nothing. The stars themselves seemed to dim when this force approached. The beings behind this destruction were called the Varkari. Nobody knew exactly where they came from, but their reputation spread faster than light. They didn't talk or bargain. They didn't ask for surrender. They simply arrived and took what they wanted. Worlds vanished, entire populations disappeared, and no one could stop them. For hundreds of years, the Varkari moved quietly and efficiently. Their empire grew, stretching like a shadow across the galaxy. Their ships looked strange, unlike anything humans had ever built. They were sleek but deadly, covered in sharp edges and dark metal that seemed to absorb light. People in space called them shadows in the void. The Varkari did not waste time. They destroyed cities and weapons with laser precision. If a planet resisted, it was wiped out. If it didn't, they took control and began to change the world to suit their needs. They turned forests to metal, oceans to fuel, and entire populations into nothing more than memories. Other alien species tried to fight back. Some had powerful weapons and advanced technology, but nothing worked. The Varkari always seemed to be one step ahead. They learned quickly, adapting to every new defense. They were like a wave that crashed over everything, impossible to stop. Most species stopped resisting. They gave up before the fight began. They sent out messages begging for mercy or signed agreements to surrender. The galaxy had never seen an enemy like this, and fear spread faster than hope. Earth watched all of this quietly at first. Humans were still new to space travel. Their colonies were small and scattered. They had not yet become a powerful force among the stars. Many leaders believed Earth was too far away, too weak to ever be a target. But they were wrong. The first warning came from Epsilon Prime, a small human colony on the edge of known space. It was a quiet, peaceful place where people were trying to build a new life. Families lived in domes beneath the atmosphere, and scientists worked on new ways to make the planet safe and habitable. The colony was busy with life when the warning beacon appeared. It was a simple message sent automatically from a nearby outpost. They are coming. At first, the people on Epsilon Prime thought it was a mistake, maybe a glitch in the system or a false alarm, but the warning was repeated. The message was clear and urgent. The Varkari were heading toward them. Panic spread quickly. People rushed to prepare. Scientists and military officers scrambled to organize defenses, but they had very little time. The colony was not built for war. It was built for peace. When the Varkari arrived, everything changed. The sky lit up with strange colors as hundreds of ships filled the orbit. The Varkari did not send a message or offer terms. They opened fire immediately. Massive beams of energy cut through the colony's defenses. Buildings exploded and the ground shook. People ran in every direction trying to find shelter. Emergency alarms rang out, mixing with cries of fear. The colony's small fleet tried to fight back, but it was hopeless. The Varkari ships moved with perfect coordination. They destroyed everything in hours. Among the chaos was a young officer who had been in charge of the colony's communications. She was not a hero or a soldier. She was just someone trying to survive and do her job. When the colony was falling apart, she managed to get into a small corvette, one of the few ships left undamaged. Her ship was old and damaged, but it was fast. She pushed it to its limits, hoping to escape the destruction. She watched as the world she had known was burned away behind her. Her name was not important. What mattered was what she carried. On board, she had data, secret files, scientific research, and information about the Varkari's movements. If Earth could get this data, maybe there was a chance to fight back. The journey was dangerous. The Varkari were hunting her across space. Their sensors were everywhere. Her ship shook under attack, systems failed one by one, but she did not give up. After days of running, she sent a message to Earth. The warning was simple but desperate. They are coming. Prepare. Back on Earth, the news was met with disbelief. Many people did not want to believe such a terrible thing was happening. Governments argued and debated. Some wanted to prepare for war. Others said it was too late. They thought maybe surrender was the only option, but there were those who did not agree. Among them was a group of military officers and engineers who believed humanity could fight back. They believed in the strength of human spirit and creativity. They looked to an old ship called the Dauntless. It was not a new ship. In fact, many thought it was obsolete. It had been designed years ago for a different kind of war, one based on close combat and surprise attacks. It was big, heavy, and noisy, exactly the opposite of the quiet, sleek ships the Varkari used. But this ship had something special. It was built without advanced AI systems. The crew controlled every part themselves. It was old-fashioned, but that made it hard for the Varkari to hack or control. It was a human ship in every sense. The Dauntless was pulled out of deep space testing. Its captain, a tough and experienced leader, was given one mission: to stop the Varkari spearhead fleet before it could reach Earth. The crew was made up of people who had been waiting for a chance to prove themselves. Many were veterans, many were outcasts, and some were just regular people who wanted to defend their home. As the Dauntless prepared to leave Earth's orbit, the crew knew this would be their greatest battle. They were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for hope. Far away, the Varkari fleet moved closer to Earth's solar system. Their ships darkened the stars. The quiet before the storm was filled with tension and fear. On board the Dauntless, the crew studied the data brought back from Epsilon Prime. They learned about the Varkari's tactics and strategies. They looked for weaknesses. They trained harder than ever before. The captain reminded them every day, "We may be outnumbered, but we are not outmatched. The Varkari think we are weak, but they don't understand humans. We fight with something they don't have, the will to survive, the ability to think differently." The stage was set. The galaxy was watching, and humanity was about to show the stars what it meant to fight back. The destruction of Epsilon Prime was quick and brutal. The colony was gone in less than a day. There was no time for a proper defense, no chance to call for help. It was a reminder to everyone just how dangerous the Varkari were, and how unprepared humanity still was. But from the ashes of that lost world, one story stood out. The story of a survivor, a young officer who had escaped the destruction in a small ship. She was the only one left from the colony's leadership. Her ship was battered, her supplies running low. But she carried something more important than herself. She carried hope. Her name wasn't famous. She was not a hero from history books or the subject of songs. She was just someone who refused to give up, someone who believed that the future could be different. Her hands were steady on the controls as she made her way through the dark emptiness of space, sending back messages to Earth with everything she knew about the Varkari. She described their tactics, their ships, their weaknesses. She warned that the Varkari were not just attacking for conquest. They were changing the worlds they took. They were not interested in allies or trade. They wanted total control, total domination. If Earth was next, there would be no mercy. The message sent shockwaves across Earth's governments and military leaders. Suddenly, the quiet distance that had made people feel safe vanished. The threat was real and it was close, but Earth was divided. Some leaders wanted to negotiate to find a peaceful way to survive. Others argued that surrender would only mean slow destruction. Fear and uncertainty grew. People debated endlessly. What could humanity do against a force that destroyed entire planets in hours? At the heart of this chaos was the military command preparing for war. They needed more than hope, they needed a plan. The young officer's data was crucial. It revealed something surprising. The Varkari didn't operate like humans or other species. They worked like one mind, a network where every ship was connected to a central command. If that command was lost, their fleet became confused and vulnerable. It was a tiny spark of hope, but it was enough. Earth's leaders agreed to send one ship to face the Varkari fleet. It was not a new ship. It was old and heavy, built in a different time when wars were fought face to face. It was called the Dauntless. The Dauntless was not perfect. It was loud, slow, and outdated by modern standards. But it had one important advantage. It was controlled entirely by humans. No artificial intelligence, no computers making decisions for the crew. Every move was made by people with human judgment and instincts. This made the Dauntless a dangerous unknown for the Varkari. Their machines could not control or predict it. The ship was like a wild card thrown into the game. The captain of the Dauntless was a strong and determined leader. They had seen war before, had fought and lost, but they never lost hope. They believed in the crew, and they believed in humanity's ability to fight back no matter the odds. The crew itself was a mix of veterans, outcasts, and those who wanted a chance to prove themselves. Many had never seen real combat, but all were ready to face whatever came. They trained day and night, preparing for a fight that could decide the future of the human race. The Dauntless left Earth's orbit quietly, heading toward the Varkari fleet that was moving closer every day. On the ship, life was tense but full of determination. The crew worked together like a family, sharing stories, fears, and hopes. They were aware of the danger, but they also knew that their mission was bigger than themselves. The young officer from Epsilon Prime was brought on board to help with strategy. Her experience and knowledge gave the crew a better chance. She had seen the Varkari's power firsthand, and she was not afraid to share the hard truths. Days turned into weeks as the Dauntless traveled through space, hunting the Varkari's advanced forces. The ship's sensors picked up signs of the enemy, but the Varkari did not seem to expect a fight. Their ships moved confidently, almost arrogantly. Then came the first battle. It was nothing like what anyone had imagined. The Varkari attacked with overwhelming force, trying to destroy the Dauntless quickly, but the crew fought back with a different kind of strength, the unpredictability of human tactics. The Dauntless was hit many times. Its shields flickered and systems failed. But the crew used the ship's age to their advantage. The ship's heavy armor absorbed damage, and the crew's quick thinking kept the ship moving in ways the Varkari machines could not understand. The fight lasted hours, but the Dauntless survived. It damaged several enemy ships before retreating to a safe distance. For the first time in many years, a human ship had stood up to the Varkari and lived. The victory was small but meaningful. It gave hope to Earth and the other colonies. It showed that the Varkari were not unstoppable, but it also showed how dangerous the fight would be. The Varkari adapted quickly. After the battle, they changed their tactics, avoiding direct confrontations and using more advanced ships. Back on the Dauntless, the crew worked harder than ever. Repairs were made, strategies revised, and new plans developed. The captain reminded everyone that this was only the beginning. The young officer studied the enemy closely. She noticed patterns in their attacks, rhythms in their movements that felt like programming, not natural decisions. She believed that if the crew could exploit these patterns, they could break the Varkari's control. At the same time, the rest of humanity was preparing for the worst. Governments built new weapons, trained more soldiers, and moved civilians to safety. People around Earth watched the sky nervously, wondering if the next message would be a call for help or a signal of defeat. The crew of the Dauntless knew their mission was dangerous. Many did not expect to return home, but they also knew that their fight was more than a battle for survival. It was a fight to prove that humans could face impossible odds and still stand tall. Every day they worked together. They shared stories of their lives, their dreams, and their fears. They found strength in each other, in the knowledge that they were not alone. And in the quiet moments between battles, they looked to the stars and wondered what the future held. Would the Varkari be stopped? Could humanity survive the coming storm? The answer was unknown, but one thing was clear: humanity would fight. Not because they believed they would win easily, but because giving up was never an option. The galaxy had seen the Varkari's power. It had seen their destruction. Now it would see something new, the fire of humanity refusing to be crushed. The young officer looked out the ship's window, watching the stars glide past. She thought of Epsilon Prime, of the lives lost and of the people still waiting for help. She took a deep breath and turned back to the control room. There was work to do. The Dauntless was unlike any ship the crew had ever seen. It was big and heavy, with thick metal plates covering its hull. Unlike the sleek, fast ships that filled modern fleets, this ship was slower and louder. It made noise that echoed through the corridors, clanks and hums of old machinery working hard. Many had called it outdated, a relic from another time. But now this old warship was humanity's best hope. The Dauntless was built for a different kind of war, one where human decisions mattered most. It was designed without artificial intelligence controlling its systems. Every move had to be made by people, pilots, engineers, gunners, working together as one. The reason for this was simple. The enemy, the Varkari, used machines that could hack or control AI systems on other ships. If the humans used AI to run their ships, the Varkari could take over and turn their own weapons against them. The Dauntless's old-school design made it unpredictable. It was a ship that thought and acted like a human, not a machine. This made it dangerous to the Varkari, who expected their enemy to be easily controlled. The captain of the Dauntless was a person of great experience and quiet strength. They had seen war before, had lost friends and colleagues, but never lost faith in humanity's ability to fight back. The crew trusted this captain because they led not only with orders but with care. The crew itself was a mix of people from all walks of life. Many were veterans who had fought in smaller battles and longed for a chance to make a difference. Others were outcasts, people who had been given one last chance to prove their worth. And some were simply ordinary individuals who wanted to defend their home. Each person knew the risks. Many had families, friends, and futures waiting on Earth or other colonies, but all had chosen to be here, to stand and fight. The ship's corridors buzzed with activity. Technicians repaired damaged parts, weapons officers loaded heavy artillery, and pilots studied star maps. Everyone was focused, knowing that the coming battle could decide the fate of humanity. The Dauntless's weapon systems were different from modern ships. Instead of high-tech energy beams, it used a mix of heavy guns, missile launchers, and even old-fashioned railguns. These weapons could deliver powerful blows but required skill and precision to operate. The crew trained constantly. They ran drills that simulated enemy attacks, practicing every possible scenario. The goal was to make every movement, every command second nature, because in the heat of battle, hesitation could mean death. One of the biggest challenges was the ship's size and complexity. The Dauntless was like a small city in space. It had multiple decks, deep engine rooms, and narrow hallways. Keeping everything running smoothly took a team effort. Engineers worked around the clock to keep the engines humming and the life support systems alive. They patched holes, fixed wiring, and made sure the ship could keep moving even under heavy fire. The captain often walked through the ship, stopping to talk with crew members. These moments were rare but important. They reminded everyone that they were more than soldiers or technicians. They were a family fighting for a shared future. Far ahead, the Varkari fleet was moving steadily closer. Their ships were numerous and strange, shaped like sharp blades and dark arrows. They moved as one, their every action controlled by a central command that connected their minds like a hive. This connection was the Varkari's greatest strength, but also their greatest weakness. The crew of the Dauntless studied every piece of information they had about this network. The young officer from Epsilon Prime helped analyze patterns in the enemy's movements. She noticed that the Varkari ships often acted in a rhythm, like a dance dictated by a single conductor. If the Dauntless could disrupt that rhythm even for a moment, it could throw the enemy into confusion. The captain shared this with the crew during a briefing. "We're up against a force that thinks like a machine," they said. But machines have limits. They rely on order, on patterns. We are human. We can be unpredictable. We can break their control. This idea gave the crew a new kind of hope. They began to plan attacks that were strange and unexpected. Sometimes they would pretend to retreat only to circle back and strike from behind. Other times they used decoys and false signals to confuse the enemy sensors. These tactics were risky, but they worked. The Varkari began to show signs of frustration. Their ships moved less confidently. Their attacks became less coordinated. For the first time, the Dauntless crew felt they were not just surviving, they were fighting back. But the captain knew the battle was far from over. The Dauntless was not just a warship. It was a symbol that humanity was not afraid to stand and fight, that humans could use their creativity, their will, and their courage to face a force that seemed unstoppable. Every crew member carried this spirit. They worked long hours, kept watch through endless nights, and stood ready to face whatever came next. The ship was old, but it was strong. The crew was small, but it was determined. And together, they were a force the Varkari had never seen before. As the Dauntless moved closer to the enemy, the crew prepared for the battle that could change everything. They didn't know if they would win. They didn't know if they would survive, but they knew one thing for sure. They would fight with everything they had, because humanity's story was not finished yet. The stars ahead held danger, but also hope, and the Dauntless was ready to face it. The Dauntless moved steadily closer to the heart of the Varkari fleet. Every day brought new tension. The crew could feel it deep inside, the weight of the coming battle, the fear of the unknown, and the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, they could change the course of history. Life on the Dauntless was a mix of hard work and quiet moments. The ship was large and noisy, but inside the crew made it feel like home. They ate together in the mess hall, shared stories in small groups, and looked out the windows at the stars that stretched endlessly around them. For many, this was their first real mission. They had trained for months, but nothing could prepare them fully for the reality of facing an enemy like the Varkari. The captain often reminded everyone of what was at stake. "We are not just fighting for ourselves," they said during one of the briefings.
"We are fighting for all those who cannot fight.
For the world's already lost. For the future of humanity." These words gave the crew strength. They worked harder, watched more closely, and stayed ready for anything. One of the most important parts of the mission was the communications center. Here, the young officer who had escaped Epsilon Prime spent hours every day analyzing signals from the Varkari. She was quiet but focused, her eyes scanning screens filled with data. She had learned that the Varkari fleet communicated constantly through a complex network, like a web that connected every ship. If that web could be broken, the Varkari ships would lose their coordination and become vulnerable. But breaking that network was not easy. The Varkari had built it to be strong and fast, designed to resist attacks and keep their fleet moving as one. The Dauntless had only one chance to do this. They would have to get close enough to strike the command ship, the center of the Varkari web, and destroy it. The plan was risky. The Dauntless was slower and fewer in number. They could not fight the entire fleet head-on. Instead, the crew would have to use everything they had learned. They would have to move quickly and quietly, avoid the main fleet sensors, and launch a surprise attack. Training for this mission was intense. The crew practiced over and over, running drills that pushed them to their limits. Engineers worked to keep the ship's engines running at top speed. Gunners trained their aim on simulated targets. Pilots practiced tight maneuvers through narrow spaces. Every detail mattered. The captain gathered the crew for one last meeting before they began their approach. "We know the risks," they said, looking around the room, "but we also know what we are capable of. We will use our minds, our skill, and our courage. The Varkari think they are invincible. We will prove them wrong." The crew nodded, their faces set with determination. As the Dauntless entered the Varkari space, the stars outside grew brighter and more crowded with ships. The enemy fleet stretched across the sky like a dark storm, a river of metal and light. The tension inside the Dauntless was thick. The crew worked quietly but quickly. Every sensor was watched closely. Every signal was analyzed for danger. Then suddenly the silence broke. The Varkari fleet detected the Dauntless. Alerts blared through the ship. Red lights flashed. The crew rushed to their stations. The captain gave calm, clear orders. "Prepare for battle. Stick to the plan. We move fast, hit the command ship, and get out." The Dauntless raced forward, dodging enemy fire and weaving through the enemy ships. The old warship's heavy armor took many hits, but the crew held steady. The pilots used every trick they knew to avoid the Varkari's sharp weapons. The gunners fired back, aiming for weak points on the enemy ships. The ship shook violently as explosions rocked the hull, but the crew did not falter. Finally, they reached the command ship. It was massive, surrounded by smaller vessels that moved in tight formation. The Dauntless's crew worked together perfectly. Engineers powered up the weapons while the pilots positioned the ship for the attack. With a roar, the ship's guns fired. Heavy blasts tore through the enemy formation, breaking through shields and damaging the command ship. The Varkari fleet reacted quickly, launching counterattacks. But the Dauntless was ready. The crew moved with speed and precision, dodging attacks and keeping their focus. Inside the communications center, the young officer worked furiously. She sent signals to disrupt the Varkari network, aiming to cut the connection between the command ship and its fleet. Slowly, the enemy ships began to falter. Without orders, they moved hesitantly, their attacks losing coordination. The crew could feel the change. The tide was turning, but the battle was not over. The Varkari command ship began to fire back with its most powerful weapons. The Dauntless shook violently as energy beams slammed into the hull. Systems began to fail. Lights flickered. The ship's engines struggled to keep them moving. The captain shouted orders to keep fighting. "Hold the line. Keep pushing forward." The crew responded with everything they had. Engineers worked on repairs while gunners focused on the command ship. In the final moments, the Dauntless fired a massive volley of weapons that struck the command ship's core. The enemy ship exploded in a brilliant flash, sending debris flying into space. With the command ship destroyed, the Varkari fleet became chaotic. Ships drifted aimlessly, unable to communicate or coordinate. The Dauntless did not waste time. The crew used the confusion to escape, moving quickly away from the battlefield. As the ship sailed back toward safety, the crew let out breaths they hadn't realized they were holding. They had done the impossible. They had struck a powerful blow against the Varkari, but the victory came with a cost. The Dauntless was badly damaged. Many crew members were hurt. The ship would need time to repair before it could fight again. Back on Earth, news of the battle spread quickly. People cheered for the brave crew of the Dauntless. For the first time in a long time, hope returned to humanity. But the fight was far from over. The Varkari were strong and had many ships left. They would recover and come back. The captain gathered the crew once more. "We have won a great victory," they said. "But this is only the beginning. We must be ready for whatever comes next." The crew nodded. They were tired, but their spirit was strong. They knew they had faced darkness and survived, and they knew they would fight again because this was their home. This was humanity's future, and they would never give up. The Dauntless had escaped the battle, but the journey back was far from easy. The ship was damaged, and every crew member could feel the weight of exhaustion. Yet even in the quiet moments, there was a new energy among them, a sense of hope that had not been there before. Repair teams worked around the clock, patching holes in the hull and fixing broken systems. The engines had been pushed to their limits, and the crew was uncertain if they would even make it home. The captain moved through the ship, checking on the crew. They knew how tired everyone was, but they also saw the fire still burning in their eyes. The battle had changed something inside them. It had shown that humans could face impossible odds and survive. In the communications room, the young officer from the destroyed colony studied the data from the fight. She saw patterns in the Varkari fleet's retreat, disorganized, slow, confused. The destruction of their command ship had sent shockwaves through their network. It was a chance humanity could not waste. The captain gathered the crew for a meeting. "We have dealt a heavy blow to the Varkari," they said, "but they will not stop. We must prepare for what is coming next. We must be ready to fight again and to win." The crew listened carefully. They knew that victory was still uncertain, but they also knew they could not give up. Back on Earth, the news of the Dauntless's success spread quickly. People gathered in streets and homes, watching screens and listening to reports. For the first time in many years, they believed that humanity had a chance. Governments worked together, sharing resources and knowledge. Scientists studied the data brought back by the Dauntless. Engineers and shipbuilders prepared new vessels, inspired by the old warship's success. But building new ships took time. The Dauntless would need to fight alone for now. On board, the crew worked to recover. Injured crew members were cared for, and the ship's systems were slowly restored. The ship groaned and creaked as it moved through space, but it still held together. The captain reminded the crew to stay focused. "We have a mission," they said. "We are the first line of defense. We must protect Earth and the colonies until help arrives." The young officer continued her work, analyzing every piece of information. She discovered that the Varkari, while powerful, were not invincible. They had weaknesses, gaps in their defenses, limits in their communication, moments of hesitation that could be exploited. The crew trained harder than ever. They practiced new tactics based on the officers' findings. They drilled on speed, precision, and teamwork. The Dauntless was old, but it was becoming stronger in new ways. The crew's determination was its greatest weapon. One evening, as the crew rested, the captain sat quietly in the control room. They looked out at the stars, thinking of the worlds lost and the people still waiting for safety. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers, but also full of possibilities. Humanity had survived before through wars, disasters, and struggles. This was just another challenge. Suddenly, alarms sounded. The ship's sensors detected movement. Varkari ships were approaching. The crew sprang into action. The Dauntless was ready. The new battle would be different. The Dauntless would not only fight for survival, but to protect all of humanity's hope. The stars outside glowed with danger, but also with the promise of a future worth fighting for. The alarm echoed through the corridors of the Dauntless. The crew snapped to attention, the quiet moments of rest over. The Varkari ships were closing in once again. This time, the battle would be even more intense. But the crew was ready. They had learned from the last fight. They knew the enemy's strengths and weaknesses. More importantly, they knew what it meant to fight for their home, for their families, for the future of humanity. The captain stood on the bridge, eyes sharp and calm. They could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down, but it did not break them. Instead, it made them stronger. They looked around at their crew, men and women of different ages, backgrounds, and stories, all united by a single purpose. The Dauntless was more than just a ship. It was a symbol of human resilience. Outside the windows, the Varkari fleet appeared like a storm on the horizon. Sharp, dark ships moved with deadly precision, but this time the Dauntless was not alone. Small, newly built support ships had arrived, guided by the data and hope the Dauntless had brought back. Together, they formed a small but determined force. The captain issued orders calmly. Keep formation. Use the new tactics we have practiced. Stay focused and trust each other. The crew worked quickly. Gunners loaded weapons, engineers monitored systems, and pilots prepared for tight maneuvers. Every person had a role, and every role mattered. The battle began with a sudden burst of energy. The Varkari fired first, their beams cutting through space with deadly speed. The Dauntless and its allies moved quickly, dodging and weaving through the attacks. The old warship's heavy guns roared to life, firing powerful blasts that shook the enemy ships. The newer vessels followed with fast, precise strikes, hitting weak points the Dauntless's crew had discovered. The Varkari ships responded with fierce attacks, but their communication was still disrupted from the previous battle. Their movements were less coordinated, giving the humans an advantage. Inside the Dauntless, the young officer who had escaped the destroyed colony worked tirelessly. She sent out electronic signals designed to confuse and disrupt the enemy's remaining network. Her fingers flew over the controls, eyes fixed on the glowing screens. Her work was crucial. Without clear orders, the Varkari ships began to hesitate, slowing their attacks and leaving openings for the humans to exploit. The crew noticed the change. Confidence grew with every successful strike. The Dauntless moved like a living thing, old metal and new hope combined. The captain stayed in constant contact with the other ships. "Keep pushing," they said. "We are breaking their lines. Don't let up." The battle raged for hours, filling space with flashes of light and the sound of engines straining. The crew worked through exhaustion and fear, driven by a deep sense of duty. Slowly but surely, the Varkari fleet began to fall apart. Ships turned away or drifted aimlessly. The command network was fractured beyond repair. In the final moments, the Dauntless and its allies launched a coordinated attack that shattered the enemy's main formation. The Varkari ships fled into the darkness of space, broken and defeated. Cheers erupted on the Dauntless. The crew hugged and smiled, tears of relief and joy streaming down their faces. The captain looked out at the stars, knowing this victory was more than just a battle won. It was a message to the galaxy. Humanity would fight and humanity would survive. But the captain also knew the road ahead would be long. The Varkari were not gone forever. They would regroup and return. The fight for humanity's future was far from over. The Dauntless had proven that even in the darkest times, courage, teamwork, and hope could light the way. As the ship sailed back toward Earth, the crew prepared for the next chapter of their story, one where humanity stood tall among the stars, unbroken and ready to face whatever came next. Because this was not just a fight for survival. It was a fight for everything they believed in, and they would never stop fighting.